I think this gives us an awful lot to chew on. But to recognize again that this needs to be progressive and not a one-shot. And finally, something else that has applied very much in terms of trying to deal with the issue of terrorism has to do with the internal developments of individual countries. Less in terms of, let's say, some of the countries on the Gulf littoral, than more broadly in the region itself. For instance, which applies very much to Iraq. It's not the Turks have to be deeply involved in that. I don't want to do more than. But where the capacity of regional countries, plus the Western countries, to do things in regard to the development of societies and economies and local populations can over time have a tremendous impact on underpinning security overall in the region. Well, let me stop at that point. This is herding kittens, but frankly I think the alternative is for the United States to be stuck doing things for the long term that the American people, quite frankly, don't want us to have to do.
Thank you very much. We're making it clear that greater regional cooperation is the key to greater regional security. And maybe I'll start off. Carnegie had a paper out recently about the importance of regional security and speculated about the importance of bringing maybe Turkey and Iran and the Gulf states together. What is your view of the possibility of something like this happening, the value of it, and the conditions under which, let's say, the Gulf states and Iran might engage in a regional security or even just a regional agreement?
Well, I think I've already talked about the value, the benefits, including very self-interested for us, in order that we do not have to be so preoccupied with this part of the world at great cost elsewhere. Or even, having spent $1 trillion there, necessarily at great cost at all. Whether we can get there or not, I don't know. In terms of having the major players in the region engaged, that would be a prerequisite. Whether Iran would be a player obviously becomes the $64,000 question. It is possible to create a system of containment without Iranian participation. And this, I believe, is the direction in which we are now going. Now, let me say something about Iran. I think right now we have in American policy 5 alternatives. The 5 alternatives are, number one, Iran decides not to get the bomb either because it can't, or it decides this is a white elephant, we don't want to get it. I think it would be a white elephant. I think they'd be incredibly stupid in terms of their long-term interest to get the bomb. They'd be more of a pariah state today. We're not going to leave. And the kinds of coalescence against them would be extreme. They might feel good about it in a limited nature, but it's not very smart. Well, that's number one. Number two, sanctions work. Well, I don't have a lot of confidence, particularly in the not-too-distant future, including within the time frame of 1 year that we're trying to get something done in Arab-Israeli. And as I've argued, I do not believe it is possible to get an Arab-Israeli agreement of any substance other than what we've done so many years. I've been doing this since 1967, which might look like a good game, but nobody really believes in it, unless we can move forward. And I don't think sanctions are going to work in the short term. In particular, sanctions have worked very rarely historically. All the key countries have to take part, and we already see the Russians are a little goosey, the Chinese have their own ambitions. We've seen what happened with regard to the Turks and the Brazilians, well, the only effect of which is we got angry instead of realizing that they're trying to tell us something. We maybe needed to accommodate that a little more intelligently than we did. Particularly if you look at the letter that President Obama actually wrote to the President of Brazil. Read it, it's on the internet. You'll be forgiven. The Turks and Brazilians can be forgiven if they thought maybe our response was not the best there was. And it's not clear that we're going to be able to run things the way we did in the past. We need to think carefully about that. Also, sanctions that seem to a country, I'm being analytical now, as somehow leading to an undercutting of their own security is not necessarily something that's going to work, and particularly when a leader like Khamenei and Ahmadinejad are able to say, see what they're doing to us and to you, when sanctions are imposed, populations rarely blame their own government. Well, that's historic. Maybe it'll work. The third thing is if the regime changes on a timely fashion. And also when it changes, it also changes dramatically Iranian foreign policy. I think that's a pretty tough bet to make. Now, it's one thing to say if they would have a nuclear program which is squeaky clean about moving towards a nuclear weapon. The president, in his interview with Iranian television the other day on the BBC, was quite clear about that. You can have your nuclear program. Sanctions will come off if we know you're not going for a bomb. If you want to go beyond that, I don't think you're going to get that from any Iranian government. Because at least the non-military program is part of showing that they're a grown-up country. It goes way back to the Shah. I have to be very careful about that. So I really don't think we can rely upon that. So that's three elements of policy. What are the other two? Number one, live with an Iranian bomb. I think that's where we may be heading. I can design a deterrence policy. I could design a containment policy. I don't think these people are madmen, et cetera, and if they are, nothing to do about it anyway. But there are prices to be paid. One, it's expensive. Second, it means we live there for a long time. Third, it structures a policy of containment that might take you a long time to move beyond. And if I were Israeli, I would be content with that. The Israelis are not just making idle chatter when they talk about an Iranian bomb being an existential threat. We have to take those things very seriously. Now, what's the final? And I think that's probably where we end up with current policy. The final thing is a war against the Iranians of one sort or another. The President of France, I think, had a very good little aphorism. He said, I could see two catastrophic outcomes. One, Iran gets the bomb, or two, we attack Iran. I don't think we can say that the use of military power by us or the Israelis against Iran would be a cakewalk or something we would like to entertain. I think that would be one of the worst things for American policy in the region, a good deal worse than the invasion of Iraq. Now, maybe Iranians will play with that, but I think we have to be very, very careful about that. The idea about keeping all the options on the table, fine. It's a bargaining counter, but I'm not sure it's a serious way of looking at it. In fact, I think the president is bound and determined not to go to war with Iran, and I think the U.S. military is also, if you look at what you actually say, well, you go through those five and you say, hey, wait a second, that's not a great list of alternatives. I'd like to try another thing. Please try it. Say to the Iranians clearly, as we have already said to the North Koreans, and as we said to the Soviet Union, and they said to us from about the late 1960s on, if you are prepared to consider our security requirements as well as your own, we will then take your security requirements seriously. Security for security.